Welcome to the fourth episode of Gigahand Dreams. This will be a little bit non-traditional because Erika Davis-Pitre is going to give a talk to us for an hour instead of me talking back and forth with her, although I do ask a couple questions at the end. And it was a talk at a Worldschooling gathering in Zihuatanejo in Mexico in a beautiful beachside glass room. Gigahand Dreams is funded in part by the National Science Foundation. Erika is an expert in unschooling and worldschooling and got her expertise not from any school, but from doing it. The word unschooling itself was kind of defined in reaction to what was happening in school. In the name worldschooling, we see the idea that the whole world is a school. I think most unschoolers would agree with that. And there's a new movement of worldschooling families that treat the world as a school by moving around and learning as they go. And so Erika's going to talk about worldschooling and unschooling. I want to live in a world built by all of us. A gigahand is a measure of worldwide creativity. How can we reinvent learning? What would a world look like built by 8 billion pairs of hands? This is the Gigahand Dreams podcast.
I'm very happy to be here. I'll explain a little bit about myself because it's helpful. I'm the mother of 4 adults. The first 2 always went to school. They were not homeschooled, unschooled. They always went to school. The third child was who I call my bi-schooler because he started out in school, then went to, we moved. He went on our European adventure with me. Then we moved to Connecticut and he was unschooled. And then he came to me and said, I'm not the one. I have a hard time making connections with people. I'm really shy. I want to go to school so I can form something here because we knew no one in Connecticut. So after traveling all over the Northeast, up to Canada, down to Florida, really getting the most out of living on the East Coast, we're West Coast people, he went to high school. I gave him 2 weeks. I said, he's not going to be able to put up with the ridiculousness of an American high school. He got there, acclimated very well, was on everybody's best kid list. And the difference was he wanted to be there and he knew he didn't have to be there. That was the benefit. So his 4 years of high school led to 4 years of college. He is studious as all get out, but he also knows you have to want to be there. And if you don't want to be there, figure out why and go somewhere else. So that's the legacy of unschooling for him. And then my 4th child should have a PhD in schooling because he went to 2nd grade. That was his only full year of school. And he had some really good experiences and some really not so good experiences. So at the end of 2nd grade, I said, the last month, I said, make the most out of it because you're not coming back. And he was so generous and so thoughtful of that last month of time because he knew it was going to be the end and he wanted to influence as many of his classmates as he could. And, you know, that was 20 years ago. And those influences are still felt by the kids that he hung out with because he was such an unusual child. I got told that so much for his 1 year of school. He's such an unusual child. And usually that means trouble or troubled. And for him, it just meant eccentric. He played with the kindergartners and he was in 2nd grade. And you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be bigger and better than that. He reached out to the disabled community that went to the school. He was talking to me for the first 6 weeks, you're not allowed to go into the classroom. And he was talking to me about Bree, this girl that was in his class and how expressive she was and how she made him feel included and special and wanted in his class. And the first field trip, I volunteered because I'm that kind of mom, to go on the field trip. And I couldn't wait to meet Bree. I wanted to meet Bree. And Bree was a quadriplegic, nonverbal girl who had an aide. And he had learned how to use her touchpad and how to read so much better because of the touchpad, so he could communicate with Bree. And I never knew she was one of the children that had an aide in class and was nonverbal. And that was one of my proudest mama moments, because she was just a friendly face in his class. And basically all she could do was smile and nod. That's it. Or say no with the everything else was via this touchpad. And he was so fascinated with the technology that made it able for her to communicate. um, he took to her, and the whole school year he was her special buddy. He asked her if she needed water, just informed her of his desire to have a special friend. And I liken that to unschooling. I liken that to always seeing people for what they are, not for what they could be, should be, would be, but actually for what they are. So the majority of my time will be spent telling you of the glories of unschooling and child-led learning. And actually, it's not just child-led learning. I like to call it partnership learning. So you partner with your child to fulfill the desires and the passions and the curiosities. And you use your advanced age and experience to augment their curiosity and passion. You don't lord it over them. You're not the wise people over here. You're not the teachers or the scholars. You're the partners, sharing information like you would with a partner. You don't lord over your partner. If you're working on a project, what do you bring to the table? What do you bring to the table? And you collaborate and make it better. So that's what unschooling is to me. It's more a partnership education that is child inspired. Because I like child inspired. Because sometimes children don't know what you know, knowing them. So if you're always waiting for the child to lead, you will stall at points because they don't know what it is they don't know. So as a partner, oh, she's interested in botany. I know this really cool program over here. She might be interested. How unschooling varies from other ways of learning, that suggestion is just that. It's not a demand. It's not a, you should do this or you will do this. It's, would you like to do this? I find that when I'm nervous, when I was nervous about teaching and learning, I took a class. I didn't force my child to take a class. I took a class. And if that class was interesting to me, that he saw it was interesting, hey, what's that all about? And 9 times out of 10, he would participate. And the nice thing about it, his participation is I learned more because he asked questions I didn't think of. And he wanted experiences I had no clue of. So the learning was symbiotic and the flow was natural when you trust. Now, as a world schooler, particularly if you stay put in a place for longer than 6 or 8 weeks, an immersion experience in a local school, in a local setting, is an excellent opportunity to experience culture, language, and the rich experience of being with peers, ones that are your age or a little older or a little younger. Uh, a lot of unschoolers would poo-poo that. I don't. Anytime you can get a rich learning experience that influences the rest of your experiences, take advantage of it. But be mindful if that experience is too punitive, if there's punishment and shame behind the not learning. Even if it's a rich and full experience, you'll lose your trust bond with your child if it's so radically different than how you move through the world. So you always have to weigh out learning experiences as how they build on your relationship or how they detract from it. For me, learning should never have shame and learning should never be punitive. If you're not learning something, it's either you have a poor teacher or you're not ready to absorb that information. And it doesn't matter how old you are. There are things that I've learned at 45 that I never could have learned at 14. And there are things that I learned at 14, it's really difficult to learn at 45. It's possible, but it's really difficult. Don't let anyone tell you anything has to be learned young, because that's a lie. If you have to eat, sleep, or pee, you learn really quickly how to get those needs met. And it proves to us we don't need to put a stop and a start point on any kind of learning. And that's including for adults and children. Learning a language is easier when you're younger, but it's possible when you're older. All it has to be is passion and lack of shame. Why adults don't learn languages as easily as children? We stumble on a word and we feel shame. And we retreat in the shame rather than embrace, laugh at it, have it as a stumbling point and move on. So no child needs to learn a language as a child because that window will close. It's so false. And it sets up a lifelong dealing with shame, learning shame. And that's passed on to kids. There is no child or adult that's bad at math. They're bad at the shame that's associated with math and the punitiveness that's associated with math. That's what they're bad at. They're bad at accepting that shame. So let go of shame. For all of you that have young children that have not been taught math, teach physics first. It makes math make sense. So talk about the world in quantities. Talk about the values of those quantities. That's math, that's physics, that makes times tables, any shortcuts, it makes sense. Why do we teach the shortcuts first when they're irrelevant? And that's what we do. In most of the Western world, we teach the irrelevant shortcuts before we teach the relevant fact that makes the shortcuts make sense. I say turn it on its head. Because when I wanted to know quickly how many pieces of pizza were in that pie, I naturally wanted to know multiplication, fractions, subtract. I wanted to know those things so that I could get my fair share. And it's true of everything. So try to make practical math first. And practical math is shopping, growing things, dividing things, especially if your children have siblings. The rule of one of you cuts and the other one chooses. Oh, you get really precise when you're the person that's cutting and you want to make sure it's even because the chooser is going to pick the larger. So you make sure it's so specifically cut. And that's math. And it's so easy and free of shame and of guilt. That's math. Same thing with science. Science is discovery. It's taking what's natural and normal and breaking it down so you know why that process happens that way. And without shame of not knowing and the punitiveness that comes with that, just the natural curiosity. Science is easy because we haven't separated it from our natural world. So I encourage you, no matter how you school, to remove shame and punitiveness. I had kids in school. It was really important, the grades, really important to the school. It was not important to me. If they were A students and they did really well, I said, good for you. If they were a B student and did their best, great for you. If they were a C student and did their very best, worked hard, I said, magnificent. Why do you say magnificent for a C? I said, the effort was more for the C than it was for the A. The effort, the stick-to-itiveness, because it wasn't intuitive. It wasn't something you were good at. So you got a C, and I think the effort to get a C is so much more valuable than the effort for an A. Because an A means you got the passion, you get it, and you're working hard for it. But the C means you don't quite have the passion for it, but you're going to give it your all and you're going to work really hard. And so I took away the shame from the grade. I had many a teacher say to me, do you want them to be quitters? I said, yes, I do. I want them to be quitters. They were like, what are you talking about? I said, I want them to know if it's not for them, they can walk away and find another outlet or another way to get that same knowledge. I'm raising quitters. Our problem is we raise winners. And if you're raising winners, you're raising losers as well. Because whatever they don't succeed at, they fail. Whereas if you raise quitters, you raise starters and stoppers rather than winners and losers. And if you see it to the end, great. And if you know it's not for you, absolutely great. Because we all know instances where being a quitter pays. When you get that gut feeling that you're in the wrong place or you're with the wrong person or something is going on, if you have known since you were a child that walking away is fine, it applies to so many other situations. So yes, I encourage you to raise quitters, but I also encourage you to raise starters. Start something, see if it's for you. If it's not for you, retreat. When you partner with your children, and that's what unschooling is to me, you can encourage your quitter to see another angle. And because you have a good trust bond, they will take you up on it. They will say, okay, I want to quit this because it's not for me. Well, this is the first 3 classes. I feel like the 4th class, you'll really know if it's not for you. If my quitter said, no, I'm done, I said, okay, you're done. And it didn't matter what anybody else thought about it. I reinforced their need for not only learning autonomy, but learning support. And I had plenty of teachers, coaches come to me and say, you really should encourage them to push beyond X, Y, Z. And I said, I would do that if we didn't have a trusting relationship. But my trusting relationship is worth more than remaining on a soccer team, guitar lessons, all the other things I expose my kids to. My relationship with them, the trust is worth more. We might return to this. We might return to this lesson, this skill, this activity at a later time. But right now, I want my learner to know I support them 100%. And it was more important to me. Now, every passion that you ever have takes some kind of commitment, some kind of experience, some kind of wading through, some kind of lull, some kind of pushing through. The fear outside of the unschooling community is they will never learn to push through. That is so absolutely not true. After witnessing thousands of unschoolers all over the world, all genders, all shapes and sizes, all family structures, I can tell you this, the key trait of unschoolers is the fact that when they're passionate about something, they line up what they have to do to get what they want. And they do it. I had a night owl that hated getting up in the morning, just hated it, until there was something that was happening in the morning that he wanted to do. I also never had bedtime, but I would witness you breaking down at that game, screaming, yelling, becoming frustrated, and I would just come over and say to my son, you need to go to bed. Nothing good is going to come of this. You need to go to bed. He'd look up, frustrated, ready to scream, and he goes, 5 more minutes so I can shut this down. On the 4th and a half minute, he's in his bed because he trusted that I wasn't telling him because I wanted him to go to bed. It wasn't because I wanted peace in my house. I really did, by the way. I really did want peace in the house. It wasn't because of that. It was because of my concern for him and that the frustration would lead to him devaluing himself to such a degree that coming back to that game was going to be impossible. So go to bed. You're tired. Nothing good will come. And the same would happen if we had something early morning planned. Before I went to bed, I said, I'm going to be knocking on the door at whatever o'clock. You might want to consider that as you schedule your evening. Good night. And if it was something really important, like a flight, where it couldn't be avoided, where I couldn't shoot it out or do something different, you need to go to bed. I'm going to bed and you need to go to bed because I don't want to deal with crabby Cam. And he would look at me and go, oh yeah, we've got that flight. Yeah, we got that flight. Go to bed. And it worked our whole parenting relationship. So our arguments were not about going to bed or cleaning your room or any of those things. Our arguments were about truly differences of opinion. Don't be afraid to disagree with your children and show them the proper way to disagree and the proper way to resolve those disagreements. Don't not argue with your significant other partner. Don't not do that. Do it in a constructive, helpful way so that they learn, oh, conflicts can be resolved. It's a sad adult that doesn't know how to resolve conflicts without drama or without a blow up or without a huge separation and degrading. That's another little gem about unschooling. We had substantive talks and I could be disagreed with. My third child was the most contrary. If I said black, he said white. If I said up, he said down. And we had these passionate conversations that drove my husband crazy because he thought, he came from a non-confrontational home. This is it. I came from I call it a litigation home. We were always litigating. Oh, you want me to do that? Well, here's a wrinkle. How can we do something else? And this and that. We were constantly negotiating. We were constantly talking each other in and out of things. And my third child was born into that family because he was challenging as all get up, but so respectful of the challenge. And I was respectful of the challenge. I never trumped him by saying I'm the mom or I'm the older person. What I did trump him with, I have direct knowledge. Do you? And then he'd go, no. And I say, well, you need to get some and then come back to the table. That give and take was hard earned. And I repeatedly made mistakes and I repeatedly owned my mistakes and went forward. And that's, to me, is the beauty of unschooling, is you're schooling too. You're relearning. Unless you were unschooled as a child, you're relearning and unlearning a lot of traditional values and restating parity. Never forgetting that you're mom. Never forgetting that you're dad. We were partners, but I knew the power structure of our relationship didn't change. I was still the one the authorities talked to. I was still the one that had to make some final tough decisions. I never forgot that I was the one that kind of ran the show for many years until they were old enough to run their own show. And that age comes earlier or later, depending on your partnership. So I had one child that was ready to go. 12, 13 was the dictator of all things them. And I had one child that was perfectly happy to take dictation until they were, close to 20. It's like, whatever you say, mom, what are we doing this week? And it really matters about the partnership and the comfort that your learner feels. Notice how I interchange children with learner, because I'm trying to get you to the point where you see yourself and your children as learners and that you're learning all the time. It never stops. There aren't subjects, there aren't periods, there aren't classes, there aren't directives. It's all the time. You're learning all the time. And you're learning value all the time. What do we value? If you're in your car and someone cuts you off on the road and you're swearing and you're, just completely obsessed with letting that driver in that car that's 5 kilometers down the road, what an a-hole he is. Um, your learners are learning that. If you, at that same instance, decide, man, he must really be in a hurry. He didn't even see me. Your learner is learning something else. See? Always learning, always taking it in, always informing their environment and your environment by your actions rather than your words, rather than the lessons. They're learning all the time. We're learning all the time. I'm many years old and I'm still learning all the time, as if I was a kindergartner, as if I was learning to walk and talk. I'm still learning. I say, if not every day, at least every other day, I have a moment. I am this many years old before I learned that. I did not know that that was the case. And I remind myself that if learning isn't happening for me, I'm either ill and I'm using my energy to make myself well, or I'm unconscious for some reason. I'm not connected to my world for some reason. And then the questioning starts. Well, why are you disconnected? Do you need a recharge? And for me, needing a recharge is a form of illness. Lay back, take in just breathing for a while. And we all need that. Now, I told you that the 2 youngers were unschooled and the 2 olders went to school. We went to a conference 10 years ago. And for the first time, well, my daughter wasn't there, but all 3 of my sons were there. And they were doing various things during the conference. And I had maybe 100 people, maybe more, come up to me and say, your sons sell unschooling. The relationship they have with you, eye contact, the depth of their intelligence, all of this speaks to unschooling. And I said, well, that one always went to school, and that one's in high school right now. It's not the unschooling, it's the relationship. I saw them, all 3 of them, as learners, and all 3 of their needs as learners were met in partnership with me. And so that's what you saw. You saw the relationship. So that's why I'm telling you, it doesn't matter if you homeschool, send your kids to school, do immersion, you're an unschooler, only academics, or you're a radical unschooler. If you partner with your children and make the relationship the focus of the learning, you can't go wrong with the schooling. And if the schooling's not right, but your relationship is, they'll tell you, this isn't right for me. And if your relationship is solid, you'll listen. Because the greatest arbitrator of an educational experience is the learner. If your child is failing in a class, consider maybe that teacher is failing to teach versus your student is failing to learn. And that's not saying it's a bad teacher. It's saying that that teacher teaches in a way that doesn't reach your learner. And we're not told that. We're told somebody's failing instead of someone's approach is wrong. So think of it that way. When you're talking to your children and trying to teach them something and you get the blah, 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 I'm not hearing you. You try another way. You get your spouse or significant other to give it a try. You give the neighbor kid down the street a few bucks to give it a try. You do different things. You always want to look at the totality of the situation. Do the personalities match? Do the learning styles match? Is your learner getting enough support in a new area? Is a learner being let alone when their process is different, but the outcome is the same? In most Western cultured classrooms, they want the process to getting to the answer to be identical. How stupid is that? We will never have another invention if that's how the world works. The world works by people seeing a problem differently and coming up with a different solution. So remember that. You want your child to be an inventor of their life. And that can't come from rote experiences. It has to come from experiences that are unique to them and other people go along with, but the discovery was theirs. How many people in this group have a secondary education? College, grad school, PhD. How many of you have that as your experience? Raise your hand. So that's at least 16 to 20 years of formal education. Unless, of course, were any of you unschooled as children? You were unschooled as a child? There's always one. There's always one. I swear there's always one. So, for all of us, except for the unschooled as a child, you had between 16 and 20 years of traditional successful education. Were you all successful? Did you get your degrees? Did you? I don't think you had to apply it. I know plenty of people that were going to be doctors that ended up teachers and art teachers at that. Were you successful at navigating that system? Or did it leave a lot to be desired? If it left a lot to be desired, raise your hand. Okay. So I'll downgrade you to 13 years. If you had any type of success in school and you want to unschool your kids, you've got to spend some time deschooling, decolonizing your brain of how things are supposed to be as far as education is concerned. The more successful you were at your educational experience, the harder it is going to be for you to let go of those old values that are supplanted. If your child went to school, traditional school, for every year they were in school, you need to take 3 months to absolutely do no structured learning. Treat it like you're on vacation and you're exploring a new area, because you are. You're exploring a new area. It's the hardest thing you'll ever have to do, but don't turn every experience into a learning opportunity. It just be fun, just for fun. Do this just for fun. Yeah, you're learning a lot. It's educational. Don't mention it and don't try to convert it. And the number one thing I'll tell you, as a radical unschooler, getting off the drug of traditional school success, is not every interest or passion will be a career. Give your 12-year-old a break. He's a paleontologist. He's really interested in dinosaurs. It's fabulous. Don't turn it into a career. Just let it be a passion. Just let it be fun. Don't introduce him to the guy you know down the street that's doing a dig. Don't do that. And unless he says, hey, that guy down the street is doing a dig. Do you think he's like an assistant or a gopher or whatever? Then you say, yeah, let's go talk to Dave down the street. Let's go talk to him. Or better yet, you go down the street, talk to Dave. I'm really excited about this because I got a partner, I got a little learner that's really interested in this. Is there any way we can connect? You showing your passion for their passion is the driver of all things. And then you go to him and say, hey, Dave down the street wants us to come to the dig for a day. Are you interested? If your young learner says, nah, man, I'm good, be good with it. Be good with it. Or take advantage of that opportunity yourself. Well, I'm going. Should I get a companion to stay with you? Shall I get something going for you? And they'll more than likely say, yeah, get Sally from down the street to stay with me while you go. And take a lot of pictures and share that. And if you do that, your learner learns you're someone that's in it for them and for yourself. I never wanted to go to crime and punishment museums in 15 countries. I never, that was not on my agenda for a European vacation. But when you're traveling with a 12-year-old boy who's very interested in how justice changed over the centuries, you get to watch people being drawn and quartered and actually knowing what that meant. Because I had a view in my mind of what drawn and quartered meant, but it wasn't what I saw. And see if I just closed my eyes. But what I learned from that, and what my learner learned from that, is when I'm interested and passionate about, mom doesn't have to be passionate about, but she has to be interested because it's another way to know me. And to this day, that learner calls me with the most ridiculous scenarios because he knows she might not be interested in it, but she's interested in me and it's something I'm interested in. And therefore, we have this trust bond. And I can say to him, I could have had a much better day not knowing that. Thank you. Be honest with your learners. But deschooling pops up. It's not, I deschooled and I'm done. It's every stage, every age, you need to take time back. Make sure you're not falling into traditional ruts. Make sure you're not assigning muscle memory to your family, to your kids. It's very easy under stress or duress to go back to a traditional way of parenting. And it's easy when you don't have those tools of knowing. Because I knew at every stage I was going to be challenged to remain wedded to the ideal if I wanted something different. For those of you that have children under 8, it's all fun and good. It's light. For those of you that have children over 13, the world starts coming in on you. Oh, will they be prepared to fill in the blanks? Will they be prepared to go to college? Will they be prepared to get a job? Will they be prepared to live on their own? Will they be prepared? I say to you, don't worry about tomorrow because it's not promised. Don't dwell on the past, what happened to you, what happened to your spouse, what happened to your grandmother. Don't worry about the past, because you cannot correct the past. No matter how much we think we can, you can't. You should be fully in the present. And I hate the clichéness of it, but I love the reality of it. Live in the present because it's a gift. It's a gift. It's a gift to not have to consider how his employment prospects, how her larger educational prospects will be influenced by what they're doing as a 13-year-old. It's a gift to not concern yourself with those things, so much so that you don't see the gift that being in the present with your learners is, with your children is. It's a gift. My friend Kelly Lovejoy, who started running unschooling conferences all over the United States, says it brilliantly. She asked, if you knew you only had a year with your child, what would you do? And do it every year. If you knew you only had a year with your child, what would you spend that year doing? And then do it every year. Because indeed, that's all you have. That's all you have. You have today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year, maybe 20 years. Maybe you can be like Michael and have your mother live to 99 and your father live to 96. Maybe you're blessed that way, or maybe not. So every year, live like you would if you knew it was the only year. And it sounds morbid, but actually it isn't. It's a blessing and a gift to be able to see that all you have is what you have. And you're building on the promise of more. but not the guarantee. So if you want to know the best explanation for unschooling, that's it for me. Living as if you have a limited amount of time. And in reality, every child is just their age for a year. A 4-year-old is not a 5-year-old, is not a 7-year-old, is not a 10-year-old. Every single stage, phase goes through. Now, here's my only punitive message. And everybody in this room is going to nod their head in a couple of seconds. We all know a 30-plus-year-old that is still 12. Raise your hand if you don't. We all know somebody who is 40 and is still 12. Their reactions are 12. Nod your head if you know someone. Why that is they missed 12. For whatever reason, 12 was not available to them. They did not get their needs met as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, wherever they stopped. They did not get their needs met. And they're perpetually trying to get that need met. And that's why they are 12 at 40. So I tell you, all you parents, don't rush. Don't look ahead to 18, even 13. Make sure it's full and rich 12. Because if it isn't, they will be revisiting that again and again and again. Honor each stage and phase. I know, especially if you have an older and a younger or an only, it's easy to push them ahead because you get so many reinforcing messages. He's so mature. She's such a little adult. That is not a compliment to me. I say thank you because it's traditionally a compliment. The person meant it as a compliment. But then I sit back with it and say, what did that child have to do that took them out of their place, for them to elicit that kind of compliment from a stranger? What was I doing at that time? If they were on their own and the compliment comes to me secondhand, great. But if I'm in their presence and they're telling me, this person, I check in. Hey, what's going on? Do you need me for anything? Oh no, mom, it's good. I'm good. I did this, that, and the other. I watched you. It's good. It's good. Then I let it leave me. But 9 times out of 10, when I got that kind of compliment, yeah, it was kind of tough. I didn't see you. I didn't know where you were. I would have preferred you do it. And I take that and I thank them. I always thank them for telling me that. And always look for me. If I'm not within your purview, always look for me. I'm here to help you. So that's my little nugget for all of you, you know. We're encouraged to mature, especially girls. We're encouraged to make them self-sacrificing. We're encouraged to make them look out for everybody, you know, give them the experience of not looking out, of relying on you, of being immature, of not being the giving one, of not being the one, of having a tantrum, of saying, no, I don't want to share with you. It's tough as a parent when you have multiple kids and they don't share. It's tough. But it's tougher if the expectation is you're not going to look out for me. You're not going to shut that sharing down. I'll look at one of my kids and they don't want to share their thing. And you know what? He doesn't have to. It's his special thing. If he can share, he will. And if he can't, he won't. And then I talk about what sharing means at a non-sharing moment. Do not try to correct at the time of opposition, at the time of trauma, at the time of discord. Do not try to correct at that moment. All they'll hear is you want it to stop rather than we want to solve. Because when the muscles are tense and everybody's ready to pounce, that's not the time to come in and say, you know, if we all just sat back. No, that's not the time. I understand that your anger. Would you like to have some time alone? And yes, I want everyone to leave me alone. Okay, we're all gonna walk away. Can you give us some kind of time period where we can come together and have a conversation about this. If they tell you next Tuesday at 8, I need a little bit closer time. I honor that you want your brother to jump off of a cliff into an active volcano, but there's a liability associated with that. For me, not you, for me. And it's all about me. And there's another thing, humor. And you know if you have a learner that is helped by humor and a learner that is absolutely appalled if you make humorous jokes about a serious situation as he has my iPad again, please. If humor does not help in that situation, don't try it. But if humor helps, try to find something funny about it. Try to make light so that they lift out of it, even if it's just for a second, because then you can signal, we'll talk about this more at another time. The biggest problem most children have in their families is around sharing. It's around if there isn't an abundance of something. And believe you me, it can be a lack of abundance of breathing space away from their sibling. So it's not always things. It's just one of my favorite comments my daughter made when she was a newer older sister. She had her two younger brothers. We were driving in the car. They were arguing about something. They were toddlers. But all of the children were very verbal. I guess they had it in them, genetically. And my daughter pipes up over the shouts of her brothers. Can you just make them stop breathing? That's all I asked, just for a while. And I said, daughter, if they stop breathing, they die. And she goes, you know, I might be okay with that. And I said, what are you saying? She says, I just don't understand. Weren't I enough for you? I mean, and I said, you were so great. You were so wonderful. We wanted more because we're greedy that way. So they're here because of you. Oh, we've got 15 minutes. I want some questions. I absolutely want some questions. So I'm going to stop talking now.
The learning process you described today is different from the dominant paradigm of learning that people think about. Can mainstream institutions ever support this style of learning?
Can is yes. Will? I don't think so. Because institutions' number one goal is systems. It's systematic whatever. It's making the process of learning systematic. So you plug in a product and your outcome is this. And as long as the learning institutions are product based, like outcome based, they're not going to change the input. So our challenge and goal, I think, especially for institutions of higher learning, I think our goal should be a destandardization of what learning looks like and an incorporation of free learning, of people bringing to the table what they're good at, what they're passionate about, so that we get a full view of a subject. And I think that's all about the standardized learning that started happening in the 40s after World War II forward. We want to test. We want to be able to quantify every activity. And most learning can't be quantified that way. There isn't a chart where you can see that we're progressing. And I think in order for the educational institutions to change, they have to be willing to get off the chart and to not give value to certain learning and not give value to other learning. I think our decline is because there isn't enough art taught. There isn't enough music taught. There isn't enough joy taught. We don't experience joy as a public. We do in our individual pods, we do with our families, we do with our associations. I'm saying that should be encouraged in the entire system of education. Everybody should be encouraged to express themselves in a way that is not standardized. So it can be poetry, it could be writing, it could be any number of expressive arts. I think we need to bring that back. So that's a yes and no. We can get there. Will we get there? It's the willingness of all of us. And we've got to get away from the scarcity mentality and get to the abundant mentality, not abundance individually, but abundance as a concept. I don't know. I looked at the pandemic and I was so encouraged at the beginning of the pandemic because the whole world shut down, which says if something isn't working, if something is detrimental to a population of people, we don't have to do it this way. So I was so encouraged at the beginning. But by September, I recognized everybody just wanted to get back to the crazy that got us here. How do we get off of the solutions that worked 150 years ago and come to find solutions that work today? Thank you so much for coming to this talk. I appreciate all of you. If you want to know more about radical unschooling or looking into educational options, particularly in places where homeschooling, unschooling is illegal, come and talk to me. I'd love to chat.